Somebody earlier was pointing out to me, whenever I asked a pointless question like counting from 50 to 0, how many pints of water I was using with ChatGPT to do that. So there is an environmental impact on this stuff, and the expansion of data centers to power all this technology is enormous at the moment, and it's going to become a problem in itself. And I think we've got another podcast which talks about some of those things, so I don't want to go into too much detail on that. I guess there are couple of things we can relate to. So with this new technology we've got around AI and hyperconnectivity, is there anything that we think that can do to contribute towards sustainability and help us do a better job? Is there anything there that we can talk about?
I think potentially, but I think it's potentially down to how companies decide to implement it. So if you think about the point you just made around using AI, using queries, cloud computing, uses a lot of electricity, uses a lot of energy, has carbon footprint. There are better places to do it than others. So we know certain countries use green energy to fuel data centers, others don't. But as a consumer, so I'll come back to the business in a second, but as a consumer, we have very little control over which data centers are used by the apps and the tools that we have. Okay, maybe we could influence those if we were conscious of it, if we knew about it. Yeah. Largely as a consumer, you don't. No. You just assume your app's going to work, query goes off to the cloud somewhere, an answer comes back, or whatever service you get comes back, and we're done with it. I think at a corporate level, we can be more conscious of it, and I think we can have influence how we utilize this technology, and certainly how our customers also utilize it, because we've got some knowledge that consumers generally don't have. Yeah. And that is, how does this stuff work? How is it configured? Where is it located? How much energy does it consume typically? And how is that energy produced? As a simple supply chain. I think getting some of that information into the consumer knowledge base would be very useful, because then we start building up over time pressure from consumers for companies to do the right thing. At the moment, there's no, other than cost, there's no real incentivization for companies to...
legislation.
There is a bit of legislation. But I think it's got to start with that knowledge, right? So without the understanding and people's general awareness of the issues and the sustainability impact and the climate change issues that come off the back of the massive increase in carbon footprint of all the big tech companies over the last couple of years, that's got to be where it starts. But I think the ability to actually do something about it is very much driven by the people who are implementing that technology. So we've got to keep the pressure upon them to be able to implement it well and choose, make the right decisions so that it can be as sustainable as possible.
Do you not think, though, that the very technology we're talking about could be some of the answer to, again, if we think about that hyperconnectivity piece and we understand much more about the circumstances and the context in which you can be so distinct and discreet about what you're doing around usage of energy, because take a domestic example. For example, if something knows my day-to-day sort of movements around the house and when I turn up and that sort of stuff, then it knows I never go into bedroom 2, and so don't heat bedroom 2. And so suddenly we see the ability to target energy in a much more focused way. So I think technology can solve some of those things.
But I think it potentially can. I think almost what we're getting onto here is personalised utility supply chain. Right? So our energy, the energy that you package or profile that you've just designated yourself, will follow you around. And if you're the person that likes to have all the lights in the house switched off when you move out of the room, great. You might be the opposite. You might want all the lights on. So I know most of my family seem to prefer that option. So that's generally what happens.
That's an optimisation process, right? I'm old enough to remember what you could do with a few kilobytes of memory on a BBCB.
Oh, yeah.
And, we are just incredibly wasteful with modern IT. The stack that you have to run the simplest few lines of Python to do something which probably didn't need to run at all. So I think, using these tools to help us write tighter, more optimized code. The fastest code is the code that doesn't run at all, right? So, optimization of that whole computing stack. We moved to the cloud because it meant we could get a server in minutes rather than months. But, how often do we ask the question, do we need it at all? Optimize the processes and really, reduce that carbon footprint. Sadly, to do that, the optimization tools are probably going to burn lots of carbon. Modern software engineering delivery is just incredibly wasteful. There's a huge opportunity to make it more efficient.
It's a really interesting observation. It actually hadn't occurred to me before, which is kind of like, now it's so easy to get everything you want.
You just throw resource at it.
And you just throw resource at it. And actually, how are we going to get people to think, should you throw resource at it in the first place, just because you can?
But humans are really bad at abundance, right? We can't cope with it, so we just throw the resource.
Convenience trumps pretty much everything in practicality. Consumers go for convenience over cost, carbon footprint. It's just proven many times over.
Interesting challenge. Isabel?
I was just thinking there has to be a cost of entry into this, because taking your example, Simon, I would love to have technology in the house, where I walk into a room and the room senses me and it switches the lights on and switches them off, and it knows when the cat goes in that it's the cat. It doesn't need to switch the lights on.
Yeah.
But to get to that point, I need to have my house wired in a particular way.
Yeah.
And so there's a cost of entry. It's like solar panels.
Yeah.
There's a cost of entry on this, and how do you do that spend to save? I'd never thought about how building code might be done wastefully or not wastefully.
Yeah.
That thought just hadn't occurred to me at all. But I think when as a human race we have lots of things, we don't save, and we almost have to be pushed into a situation where we are more careful with it. So maybe there's more requirement in society to push the fact that every time you ask ChatGPT what the weather is, actually you've just cost the planet a certain amount of resources, because people don't know. People have no idea.
It'd be a very brave AI inventor to do it.
Absolutely.
To basically say the conversations you've had today have consumed this much water
Yeah.
and this much electricity.
But delivering those models, there's really exciting things going on with, shrinking, quantizing the models so they can run on your
Yeah.
phone. So we
Yeah.
don't have to have it all running on the cloud. Yes, of course, there has to be the training and so on, but actually delivering it at the edge on the device. So it's not all going up in the cloud. That all your data is not going into somebody else's computer. I think that's we want that, right?
Yeah.
It's better for privacy, it's better for personalization, it's better for the planet. Although it does mean that everyone has to have slightly faster, smarter devices. You have to build those and ship those out to people.
It's quite interesting. I think maybe will be a subject for another day, but it's related to sustainability, is the rise of analog computing coming back. So hardwired devices that do certain things that don't have silicon chips in them in the same way they do now, because they are orders of magnitude faster and orders of magnitude less energy. And so there is almost like a new paradigm coming of like, we will start to use that technology, which was stuff that was being used back 30 odd years ago, but is now coming back because it's actually much more efficient from an energy point of view and much faster. So it'd be interesting maybe that's another subject for another day, but it certainly relates to sustainability.
That one device for one job versus now we've got one device for every job.
Exactly, yeah. And it costs a lot of energy and time to do that. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Okay, and we'll sort of do a couple of closing questions. So if you were advising an organisation now, what would you say they should prioritise looking at from day one? I've said mine, which is I think they would look at ethics, so you can't have that one. I've already taken that one away from you. So what would you ask a business to look at first?
I think we wrote something about this last summer. I think it was more about sort of cyber risk and AI risks and what should the board care about. But really, it comes down to good governance. These are risks that can be quantified, that you can take reasonable actions to resolve. And lots of it comes down to, do you know where your data is and what people are doing with it, or what AI is doing with it? If you've got a reasonable hold on that, as the technology landscape shifts, you adapt to it. If you don't, and it's all in a mess, you're going to struggle.
Cool.
Nice.
Good.
Have a vision aligned to your business goals, which flexes. Take time to work it out. Be transparent. Focus on culture, on the right culture, and experiment. Experiment and try it out. Fail fast and try again. And then focus on digital skills, because your people are so important that if you don't bring them along with you in your journey, actually you won't be able to make your journey. So make sure that your people have the right skills, whether that's your leadership team, your IT department, who have to understand the art of the possible, or the business. Everybody has to be brought along on that journey.
Excellent. That's a really interesting point. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Just one point on that. So I agree with experiment first, trying to innovate. I think the first step in that is it was also just creating some boundaries initially. So if you're a company that's new to this and you're going to tell your employees to go out and see what you can do, just have some ground rules in place. A very simple one is don't upload company documents into open AI models because they may not stay in your control after that happens. Yeah. And actually, particularly if that's client information or sensitive company information, there's got to be some level of control on that. So yes, experiment and go out and try stuff, but just have some basic rules in place before you do that. That would be my first sort of advice to any company wanting to move forward.
Nice. Thanks
very much. So thank you for listening and watching this podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. There was a multitude of subjects we could have spoken about today, so we picked a few. We'll do some more in the future maybe. Watch out for more podcasts from us. They're coming in a series, and so hopefully you'll enjoy them, learn something, and obviously get in touch with us if you've got any questions.